My family laughed when I showed up at my father's funeral, but when the lawyer read the will, they stopped laughing. The envelope didn't have a return address, just my name written in my father's familiar handwriting. At first, I thought about throwing it out with the junk mail, but something made me open it. My hand shook as I opened it, already expecting something I couldn't explain. It was an invitation to his funeral. My father was dead. I stared at the paper, trying to feel something, shock, sadness, or anger, but nothing. It had been 10 years since I last heard from the Moore family, since I left Charleston, and they'd made it clear I wasn't part of their lives anymore. I still remember the day I left. Caleb was a baby, strapped in the backseat of my car, while I drove away from a man who hurt me in more ways than one. My father didn't give me comfort. He just said, "You made your bed," and that was it. But I didn't fall apart. I built a new life for us in Savannah, small and quiet but safe. I worked at the library, read bedtime stories to Caleb, and started to breathe again. I sent money to my father every month through an old neighbor, Mr. Gerald, even though he never reached out to me. Now, I had this letter, and I wondered, why now? Caleb must have seen my face because he asked quietly, "Are you going to go?" I didn't answer. My throat was tight, and I just stared at the words. He added, "Maybe he left more than a will, Mom, maybe he left something for you." I looked at my son, my rock, and something inside me changed. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I needed to go. So, I packed my bags and prepared to return to a place I promised myself I'd never see again. The chapel was smaller than I remembered. The stained glass windows were dull under the gray sky, and the place smelled like old perfume and resentment. I walked in with Caleb by my side, holding my hand tight. People stared at us as we walked down the aisle, some surprised, others shocked. Then I saw them, Lindsay and Mark. They were standing at the front, dressed perfectly in black. Lindsay looked at me with disbelief, then smiled slyly. "Guess the prodigal daughter thinks there's money left," she whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Mark laughed quietly, but his eyes were full of judgment. I didn't respond. I just kept walking, straight and proud, even though everything in me wanted to run. I sat at the back, as far from them as I could. I wasn't there for them. I was there to say goodbye. Caleb sat beside me, holding my hand. I whispered, "It's okay, baby, we're just here to sit." But I knew it wasn't really okay. The service began, but no one mentioned me. They skipped over any memories of me and only talked about Lindsay and Mark. It felt like my father's life was being told without me in it. Caleb leaned his head on my shoulder, and I could feel the tension in the air. People whispered, but I didn't cry. I had cried all the tears I needed years ago. After the service, people left. Some ignored me, and one cousin nodded stiffly, then looked away. Lindsay walked by without saying a word, and Mark stopped to look me in the eye. "Didn't think you had the guts to show up?" he said quietly. I stared back at him. "Neither did I." He smirked. "Don't get comfortable. It's not your story anymore." He turned and left, and I sat there, frozen, with Caleb beside me. They didn't understand why I was there. I wasn't there to be part of the story, I was there to end it. The Moore family home looked the same, white columns, red brick, ivy creeping up the porch, but walking in after 10 years felt like stepping into a freezer, cold, quiet, and uncomfortable. The guests were already there, cousins, old neighbors, and business partners. I recognized most of them, but none of them looked at me. They whispered when I walked in. Lindsay and Mark barely looked up. When Mark saw me and Caleb, he grinned. "Well, this won't take long," he said loudly. "She got cut out years ago." A few people laughed awkwardly, but most turned away. I didn't respond. I kept my coat on, even though the fire was warm. Caleb stayed close, holding my hand. We sat in the back of the room, away from the others. I looked around at the old photos on the walls, pictures of Lindsay and Mark, but none of me. I wasn't surprised. They'd erased me on purpose. Lindsay caught my eye and smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile like I wasn't welcome. "You can sit if you want, Rachel," she said sweetly, "but don't expect a chapter." I didn't say anything. Caleb looked at me, and I saw that he wasn't scared. He was waiting, like something important hadn't happened yet, and I knew he was right. The room fell quiet when the front door opened again. A man named Thomas Dawson walked in, carrying a small cedar box under his arm. Lindsay barely looked up. Mark checked his watch. "Thank you all for being here," he said, his voice calm but strong. "As per Mr. Moore's wishes, we'll start with a video message before the will reading." The room grew quiet and tense. Lindsay rolled her eyes. "A video?" she sniffed. "Can't we just hear the will? We all know what's in it." Mark agreed. "Yeah, let's get on with it." Some of us have planes to catch. But Mr. Dawson walked right past them and set the polished cedar box on the coffee table by the fireplace. He put his briefcase down too, then opened the box carefully. Your father insisted, he said, that you all watch this video before anything else. Lindsay huffed. Mark muttered under his breath. A few cousins leaned forward, curious despite themselves. I stayed still, but Caleb sat up a little straighter. His hand loosened in mine. I looked down at him. His face shone with something hopeful, like he already knew what was coming. For the first time since we arrived, I didn't feel alone. The screen flickered and then showed my father. He looked older and thinner than I remembered. His proud shoulders were now a bit stooped. He sat at his old oak desk, and behind him was the same marsh painting from my childhood. He looked straight at the camera. If Rachel is watching this, he began, his voice rough, I owe you an apology I never gave. I was wrong to judge you for leaving. I thought you were weak and selfish. I let pride speak before love. His fingers twitched, something I'd never seen. When you came to my door that night, bruised and shaking with Caleb, I should have opened the door. I should have said, you're safe, but I didn't. I felt a lump in my throat. Caleb squeezed my hand again. I told myself I was teaching you a lesson, but really I was punishing you for choosing yourself. A few years ago, Gerald brought me an envelope and told me you'd been sending money every month, quietly, without wanting anything back. My breath caught in my chest. He told me how proud he was of you, about your library job and how bright Caleb is. Gerald said you look at the world with patience. My father's lips curled into a tired smile, and I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said, but I want to leave you this. You were right. You protected your child and built a better life. I've changed my will. They don't know yet, but they will. Gasps filled the room. Lindsay's eyes widened. Mark's jaw set tight. All I ever wanted was to be proud of my children, he said softly, and I am, especially of you, Rachel. Then he looked down for a moment, and the screen went black. No one spoke. Then Mr. Dawson cleared his throat. Now, by Mr. Moore's revised will, I will read the allocations. Lindsay let out a harsh breath. Mark crossed his arms, looking smug again. To my daughter, Rachel Elaine Moore, Dawson read, I leave the Charleston family home, the land, and everything in it. The room swiveled toward me, people's mouths hung open, my hands froze around Caleb's. And $250,000 in cash, plus whatever remains in my retirement account. My heart pounded. Caleb blinked up at me, unsure. And to Caleb Moore, a $100,000 college fund. My breath caught. Dawson flipped a page. To Mark and Lindsay, I leave only the old photo albums, my military compass, and my mother's Bible. A gasp went up. Lindsay stood, white-faced. There is no mistake, Dawson said. Your father updated the will 2 years ago, and it's fully valid. Mark rose. He must have been sick. He didn't know what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing, Dawson replied calmly, closing the folder. Then he read one last note from my father's handwriting. Let them remember who showed up when it mattered, who gave without asking. This house belongs to the one who needed it least but gave the most. Lindsay stormed out of the room. Mark hesitated for a moment, then followed Lindsay out of the room, disbelief hanging over him like a cloud. I stayed where I was, not because I was shocked, but because for the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt chosen. You must have tricked him, Lindsay snapped, her voice breaking as she turned on me. She still had the wine glass in her hand, but it was forgotten now. There's no way he would have changed the will on his own. You must have made him. She stopped short, as if she couldn't even believe her own words. I didn't say anything. The video had already spoken for me. You manipulated him, she said again, louder this time, her face red with anger. After everything you did to this family, you just waltz back in here and act like you're some saint. This is pathetic. Caleb flinched beside me, and I placed a hand on his shoulder. He didn't need me to protect him. I needed to remind myself that I was still standing, still here. Mark stepped forward, voice low but full of rage. We'll challenge it. There's no way this stands. He wasn't well. He was confused. Mr. Dawson didn't even blink. Your father amended the will 2 years before his health declined. He was of sound mind when he did it. The documents are witnessed, notarized, and on file with the court. There's no legal basis for challenge. Mark opened his mouth to argue, but stopped when he met Dawson's calm, unflinching gaze, the kind of look only someone with decades in courtrooms could master. The room had fallen completely silent. Some cousins whispered to each other, others slipped out quietly, Coats clutched tightly, avoiding eye contact. It wasn't hatred I felt from them, but something close to guilt, maybe shame. Lindsay's breathing was shaky. She looked torn, like she didn't know whether to scream or cry. Her hands trembled as she slammed the wine glass down on the sideboard. "This is a joke," she muttered. "A damn joke." She turned and stormed out without another word. Mark followed, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might snap. Just like that, the room emptied. They thought they'd buried me years ago, but I was still here, and now they were the ones running. The house grew quiet, not awkwardly so, but peacefully settled. I stayed in my seat for a while, Caleb beside me, his hand still resting in mine. His grip had loosened, but he didn't let go, neither did I. As the last of the retreating footsteps faded away down the hall, I stood up slowly and walked over to the old leather chair by the bay window. It was still there, worn, creaking, but unchanged. I touched the top of the chair gently, the way my father used to do. "Goodbye, Dad," I whispered. "I forgive you." The words didn't feel heavy, they just landed, like they'd been waiting to be spoken for a long time. Behind me, Caleb didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm orange light over the room, the photographs on the mantel, the wooden floors, even the air. Everything felt different now, not heavy or tense, just calm. I looked around the house one last time. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like a place that had rejected me. It felt like a home that had finally found peace. Maybe some ghosts don't leave, maybe they just wait for the right words, and I had finally spoken mine. Weeks later, the house was quiet in a new way, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, not destruction, but stillness, peace. Caleb had claimed the sunroom for his art supplies. Every morning, I'd find him there, sketching birds, cardinals, blue jays, wrens, anything he could spot in the backyard. His laughter sometimes echoed through the hallways, soft and bright, filling the spaces that used to feel empty. One morning, a letter arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address, but I knew the handwriting, Gerald Adams. I opened it slowly. "Rachel," it read, "the day your father realized it was you." I'd never seen him look so small. He carried that truth with him until the end. I folded the letter and stepped out onto the porch. Caleb was sitting on the top step, sketchpad on his lap, tongue between his teeth as he shaded a hawk's wings. I looked out over the lawn, the oak trees swaying gently in the breeze. "He saw me in the end," I said softly, mostly to myself. The girl they erased hadn't disappeared, she'd just been waiting for the truth to come home. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please like, comment, and subscribe for more great stories. Don't forget to tap the notification bell, so you never miss an update. Share your thoughts in the comments, we love hearing from you. See you next time, and take care.